Welcome to another episode of the Dentology podcast, where we discuss the business of dentistry. In this podcast series, we'll be discussing all the non-clinical aspects of dentistry, from goodwill values, finance, marketing, how to buy and sell a dental practice, mindset, through to where you can invest your money in team management issues. My name is Andy Acton, and I'm joined by my co-host, Chris Strevens. Let's jump straight into it. So welcome to our latest episode of Dentology, the business of dentistry podcast. And today, sir, it's just you and I.
It is indeed. We have no guest. We are going to be here and we're going to be talking about leadership, aren't we, I think?
Exactly. Well, when we started this podcast, it was about the business of dentistry. It's great having the guests on, but one of the things that people have said is there's certain elements of business that it's kind of good just to get back to sort of first principles as to what it's about. And I think so often people talk about leadership and management, but kind of get the two sort of crossed and interchanged, and we'll talk about management at another time, but today it's about leadership, which is very much about style, isn't it? And I know
definitely
we've talked before about the different styles of leadership, and there's some great examples out there of people who are incredibly successful but just go about it in their own imitable way.
Own little style of leadership. And also, as we've always said, there's the people we can learn from in both positives and negative leadership styles.
Yeah, well, we spoke about, we were talking about that with a guest earlier on today, weren't we?
We were. About
the things, and we've talked about this a lot, haven't we, like managers that we've worked with or for, and their style has just been appalling, but you flip it and go, well, I'd never treat somebody like that. And that's how you start to sort of form your own style. And
I think also the other thing about leadership, isn't it, it's really important. You can't really, I don't think, adopt someone else's style of leadership unless it truly is your style, because if it's not authentic, you can sort of keep it up for a bit, but then eventually you'll refer back to type, won't you? I can always remember I had a bank manager once, bless him, and his leadership style was somewhat stilted and sort of like written down, really. And I can remember once he went on a management course for how to manage the his junior managers better, and he came back and suddenly he was really nice to me and this guy called Kevin, and we couldn't quite work out what had happened. So when he went out one day, and it was the good old days of paper diaries, we looked in his diary and he'd written "Be nice to Chris and Kevin." Be nice to Chris and Kevin every day.
Authentic.
And that was like, oh, okay. So, because in reality, it wasn't part of him.
No.
But he was reminding himself, because otherwise he wouldn't be it. And it just struck me. It's like, you're trying to do this. But the answer is, you will revert to type unless you are authentic and it's original.
I think you're right. I think if there's no authenticity, there's no congruence, it doesn't join up. If you look at people like Richard Branson, they're famous for saying, screw it, let's do it. Very cavalier, very front foot, that's his style, and that works for him, and it's proven to work time and time again. But if that's not you, trying to pretend to be
how can you pretend? You're being a chameleon, aren't you? And ultimately it's not true. But
you could still be a fabulous leader without needing to be a pound in your chest, you gregarious, noisy person. You can still get, I think back to Lord Coe, when he arranged and orchestrated the London Olympics. He talks about pressure being self-inflicted. He's not somebody who you would, naturally see as being somebody who would kind of, be pounding their chest and making noise. But he led a great Olympic Games, and by all accounts, funny fact, he did it without the use of email, apparently.
Which is unbelievable. I mean, I'd struggle to... how would you organise people? But then I suppose if you go back pre-emails, that's just what people did.
And I think if you're a great leader and you've got a good vision and you've got a good message to tell, people will gravitate and draw to you. And then they then become, your ambassadors that then go on to share that message for other people.
Yeah, well, the weekend I just happened to watch The Darkest Hour. I think it's The Darkest Hour, isn't it? The Winston Churchill.
Gary Oldman.
And he's a leader. Winston Churchill was a leader for that time, and interesting enough, wasn't it? They voted in him, and at the end of the war, they voted him out again, and then they voted him back in again about 7 years later. I mean, but he was a leader for that time, and he had his own inimitable style, a bit like Margaret Thatcher. Whatever you think of Margaret Thatcher from a political point of view, I think you have to stand back and admire her leadership. Not her political views, depending on where you are, but the way that she led the country and people and her cabinet, sort of, she got them along the road, didn't she?
First female prime minister, and also back in that day, thankfully things have improved a lot, but perhaps not far enough yet in terms of equality. But back then, the position that she held and the way she conducted herself, like you say, politics aside, but I know she famously said, "I'm extraordinarily patient, provided I get my own way."
Yeah.
That's real resolve.
It is, What is that? The lady's not for turning and all those, There's quite a few good quotes from old Maggie for sure. But yeah, it's just a fascinating style, and there's that other guy. What's his name? Is it Malcolm Gladwell?
The writer.
Guy? He has his own view on leadership, which I think is quite fascinating.
Yeah, well, I think his one is if a leader's not being obeyed, then you need to ask what's wrong with the leader.
Yeah,
because it is. I think as leaders in our business, you do set the rhythm and set your tone, and we'll come on to kind of the characteristics and traits of leaders in a minute. But it's for us to set that. But I do think a lot of it also starts with your own mindset in terms of whether you're kind of a growth or fixed mindset. And Carol Dweck has written a fabulous book on this very topic, on mindset, and she kind of distills it down to there are two types of people. There's those who have a growth mindset, who embrace challenges, always look to improve themselves. If there's any setbacks, they'll look to see it as an opportunity to grow and move forward. So from that point of view, that's kind of where typically leaders and entrepreneurs sit. But then you've also got the fixed mindset, which are people that avoid challenges. They give up easily. But what I find fascinating about that is just because you've got a fixed mindset doesn't mean you can be successful, because the tennis player John McEnroe had a fixed mindset in that if things didn't go well, he'd blame anybody and everything. The balls were too soft, the court was too low,
bouncy,
the grass was
or whatever
too long,
it might
whatever
be.
it might have been. So you can still have phenomenal success, but it goes back to one of our earlier episodes on the podcast about understanding yourself and knowing what sort of person you are.
I think it's so important. I remember once when I was, working in a bank, and they send you on these commercial courses, don't you? And I remember we did this exercise where Durham Business School had basically created a bit like a mindset graph, for want of a better choice of words, and you asked various questions about, or you were asked various questions, and then eventually, you added up a total and you plotted yourself on this total and this graph. And what was fascinating was they then showed us the results of where their research from entrepreneurs was and business owners. And what you ended up with was, if you can imagine, sort of left to right, and left is fixed mindset and right is growth mindset. The vast majority of bank managers were clustered to the left on this fixed mindset. There was most of the business owners were in the right, growth mindset, and then there was I was sort of in the middle-ish, bit more growth, but still not like up the end. And there were business owners, and their point was the fact, exactly as you just said, was that unless you know who you are and what you are, how can you effectively communicate with someone else? If you can actually find out what that person is, then you can have a communication. But I think the key does start with, what am I? And goes back to what we said right at the beginning. It needs to be authentic, doesn't it? You can't pretend to be someone else, because eventually you stop pretending.
It's hard enough being yourself.
Yeah, it's tiring.
Isn't it? It's hard enough being yourself without trying to pretend to be somebody else. But I think when you get it right, because your business will get driven forward through your leadership with a good congruent leadership style. That's what will actually drive your business forward. And I guess that comes in for me, sort of three different shapes and flavours. There's the tightness of cultural fit.
Very important.
That's kind of very much the Steve Jobs, Bill Gates, Sheryl Sandberg style Facebook, Microsoft and Apple, how they operate. If you think about those organisations, the culture they have in those organisations is incredibly tight. And
I'll tell you the other thing on that, though, Andy, as well, which is quite interesting. That I saw the TV show on, I know, Disney, but about the woman who set up Theranos, who modelled herself on Steve Jobs and his leadership style. And what's sort of scary is that she modelled herself on Steve Jobs, and she was financially successful. Obviously, she went bust because she scammed loads of people, but that style got people convinced. It's like amazing, really. Yeah. Sorry, I interrupted you.
No, not at all. No. It's a good one. And then you've kind of got the more evangelical approach. The Mother Teresa, the Martin Luther King, and I mean Martin Luther King. My goodness, if you think when he did his "I Had a Dream" speech, that was in 1963. He had 250,000 people turn up to that memorial to listen to what he had to say. There weren't any Facebook groups. You couldn't join people in a WhatsApp group to say, look,
no, you had to be there, didn't
you? You had to be there, but also the way that message got shared was literally word of mouth. And 250,000 people decided to turn up to listen to what he had to say. I mean, that is a following. We talk about leadership, and today that term influencer. My goodness, that's
true. And isn't there also a story that wasn't necessarily what he was going to say?
Yeah, somebody shouted out from the audience. They said, "Martin, tell them about your dream. Tell them about your dream."
I mean, amazing. And
we'd have never had what is arguably one of the most famous speeches in history.
And also, in a way, maybe that's another endorsement of leadership, isn't it? Being prepared to listen to someone
and adapt
and think, well, actually, that's a good idea.
Yeah. And then I think the last style is kind of the buy in and get out. And you've already mentioned, Winston Churchill. It's Winston Churchill, it's Hillary Clinton. It's that style of it's my way or the highway.
Yeah.
And I suppose depending on your situation and what you're doing, they kind of all fit into different situations and at different times. And that thing about reading your audience and looking at the environment you're in, you may need to adapt your style.
Yeah, definitely. And I think that the key one, isn't it, is some people's leadership is required at certain times. And then that's what makes people what they are or have that effect. And sometimes that's just not what the world needs or that company needs or whatever it might be. That leadership style does not fit with the vision or what's going on around them.
Yeah.
But you're back to the fact of it's pretty important that you understand what your type of leadership style is.
Absolutely.
Because it doesn't mean you can't lead an organisation. What it means is you maybe have to adapt what you do to that organisation, or you engage someone else who can lead better for you, or in a more down-to-earth, authentic way for what you want to achieve.
And I think taking it away from style, I think the characteristics of strong leadership fall into 4 categories. There's inspiration. I think you need to be inspiring as a leader. I think you need to have a vision, and you need to be a champion of your future, because then that inspires people to follow you. I think you need focus for sure, because
definitely.
I mean, geez, there's so many distractions out there. If you're not focused
especially running a business.
Well, yeah, if you're not focused on the thing that you're trying to achieve, if you're distracted, then the people who work with you, they're not going to have focus. They're going to be distracted as well.
Well, it trickles down, doesn't it? If you can't focus on your own business or some part of your business, then you can't really take anyone else to task for not focusing on their bit of the business.
No.
Because it's sort of like, well, hang on a minute, you're trying to show me as a leader, and then actually you're not delivering the goods. I think one of the other ones that's really important, and we've mentioned it a number of times, it's got to be authentic.
Yeah.
It's got to be genuine. If it's not that, then you're sort of you're lying to yourself.
But the thing is, if you've got a set of values and you don't live by those values, then it unravels, because you can't be asking of other people, or you're not prepared to do yourself.
Yeah, that's right. And so you just can't keep it up. Your mask is going to slip. I mean, it's quite interesting. How many times do we see where when our dentists are selling or buying and they're put in the cauldron of pressure, the affable, lovely person turns into a bit of a monster.
Oh yeah.
And the truth is, which is the true person? Because I sort of take the view that if you're a nice person, you're a nice person. If you get under stress, you're still actually intrinsically a nice person. You might be very strident in your opinions and what you want delivered, but you're still true to yourself.
Yeah.
Whereas I think sometimes when I see people flip, you're like, oh, hang on.
Oh yeah, it's unnerving.
Which is the truth one.
Yeah, well, I suppose it's back to that kind of the authenticity but consistency of how you behave.
Yeah.
But also I think as a leader, you need self-belief. Because
hugely.
you're going to have hard days, and if you don't have staying power, I think you're gonna struggle. Because in the morning you wake up, not everything's perfect. You'll make more wrong decisions than right decisions, but it's important that you keep making decisions. But the belief that you're working towards a bigger goal and you're going in the right direction sometimes gets challenged, and you have to stick with it.
Yeah,
because it's hard.
Well, you imagine Elon Musk, when he sort of started thinking about Tesla, did he say to people, "We're going to build electric cars"? Is that a good idea? Should we? Should we? What does anyone think about building electric cars? He was like, "We're going to build electric cars." Absolutely. That was it. That's what he wanted to do: build electric cars. He didn't really think about what other people were thinking. He said, "We're going to do this. We're going to do those space rockets. Whatever it's SpaceX or something like that." That's self-belief. Steve Jobs, all these great leaders. Virgin. Richard Branson. I watched this thing on the Sex Pistols, and I hadn't realised that after the Sex Pistols got dropped by 2 record labels, they were sort of label-less, and really no one wanted them. And Richard Branson signed them, because he said the last success we had was Tubular Bells, and you're the band that is upset the British establishment so much, so let's get a part of it. Now that's being a leader, really, because that's sort of like, well, I'm just going to give it a go. Yeah. You go back to your screw it, let's do it.
Yeah.
And he screwed it and did it, and it worked out all right for him.
But I think when you then pull together those things around kind of style and characteristics, you then end up with kind of, how does that actually get deployed? What does that actually look like? And I think being nimble and on your toes as a leader is important, because I think as a visionary leader, what the messages you share will be transformational. In that you'll take people to a place that perhaps they can't see, but you can see in the future. So I think there's a transformation element, but also thinking about kind of the get in or get out, that kind of command and control. I think there's a transactional side to leadership, in that if you come into a business and something awful has happened overnight, there's been a fire or a break-in or something, I think you are going to have to go into a control and command role and give people direct instructions of what need to be done in that moment to get through. And then the last one that doesn't really get spoken about, but I love, is the laissez-faire one, which is basically, as a leader, stepping back just to create that space, because other people may want to get involved, they may want to talk, there might be some leadership drive there, but if you're always filling the space, there's nowhere for them to go.
Well, people, I think that people miss that one big time, because I think they all think it's either about like, well, I'm going to go over the horizon and then either I'll bring you with me or I'll employ someone who can actually get us there, or it's there, right, this is what we're going to do. We can do A, B, C, D. And I think it's almost perceived, maybe I'm wrong, but somehow I'll tell you what, I'm just going to give you a little space, is almost seen as a bit of a naff leadership style. I don't think it is, because I think you need to give people a bit of air to breathe. And your job, what's that great one? It's about delegating. If you're managing, delegating, not abdicating. It's the same sort of thing, isn't it? If you want to be a laissez-faire leader, that's fine, but it doesn't mean you're down the pub or not paying any attention. It just means you are just stepping back, but it's a conscious stepping back, not an unconscious stepping back. And I think people perceive it as an unconscious, whereas actually you're being positive about it.
I think it's like in communication, silence. Going quiet doesn't mean you haven't got anything to say. It means either that you're thinking or you're listening. But silence in communication is incredibly powerful. Like in leadership, I think just stepping back and giving space for others is incredibly powerful. So yeah, I think that the authenticity, focus, inspiration and self-belief, that's kind of the leadership side.
It's almost like the ingredients, isn't it? The ingredients for a leader, and they will be in different proportions depending on, what is it? You can use the same ingredients to make a Yorkshire pudding or pancake or something, isn't it? I don't know, I'm not much of a cook, but I sort of think they're probably the same, aren't they? Milk, eggs, and maybe a bit of butter or salt. And depending on what they are, you're a pancake or you're a Yorkshire or something. Or a crepe. You could probably be a crepe as well, I suppose, couldn't you?
Exactly, look at that variety of
options. Look at that, from the same ingredients of leadership. Perhaps we should put that.
We
should. Are you a pancake or a Yorkshire?
But no, I find the whole leadership thing fascinating and those subtle nuances. And I think what we'll do is we'll talk at a different time about management, because there is a significant difference between leadership and management. But they do overlap. There is a slight Venn diagram.
They definitely
where the
dovetail.
two connect.
And I think for anyone listening, whether you're a dentist principal, whether you're an associate, whether you're a business owner, and also a bit of, are you a mate to someone? Those leadership things, they apply to everywhere. It's a life skill. It's not just like you don't go, put your suit on and say, oh, I'll tell you what, I'll put my leadership hat on. The answer is it should be authentic and part of you.
Absolutely. No, good.
Brilliant.
I enjoyed that.
Be leaders.
Thank you for listening to this episode of Dentology, where we discuss the business of dentistry. If you like what you heard, please do subscribe where you found this episode. That would be amazing. And also follow us on Instagram.